And could be a reference to the generation of long hairs who wanted to live in nature with wearing buckskin and not being too materialistic. And the 9th sign is the last, although those two last signs were out of sequence, incidentally. The hippie thing should have been the 7th sign. The 9th and last sign, you will hear of a dwelling place in the heavens above earth that shall fall with a great crash. It will appear as a blue star. Very soon after this, their ceremonies of my people will cease, and the 5th world will begin after great destruction. I'd like to point out that the 5th world is a common theme throughout Mesoamerica and Southwest Indians. They have the 5th world also. The oil prediction was pretty good, but and if the last thing we saw was the breaking up of was it Skylab or Mir or something, but again, based on that, I'm not overly impressed. But if someone can show me that these were written, say in like 1800, before the first railroad, that would be cool. But we're not going to find that unless some settler wrote it down for him, and otherwise we have to move on. So that is what we call eschatology, the end of the world as we know it. And unfortunately, it's not going to happen because you cannot destroy energy; you can only transform it.
Well, I know there's a lot of people out there. Were you going to say something else?
There's a couple of more points I forgot about, but go ahead.
You have your camp who thinks that 2012 is going to be like the end of the world and it's going to be Armageddon and everything and the rapture. And then you have the other people who think that it's part of the harmonic convergence and it's a continuation or it's an opening of our consciousness and a connection with the universal consciousness. And so you have two totally divided camps there, and everybody's latching on to what they see as truth in some of these prophecies.
Right.
And I know the Hopi people, for example, are they're very guarded. I mean, you can't really, where their reservation is, you can enter the reservation, but you cannot photograph or videotape any of their ceremonies, and you're asked to leave when they see you doing that. So.
Very sacred.
Yeah, it's a sacred tradition that they have. So,
Now, to me, it kind of all blends together after a while. That everybody, all the animals, all the humans, all the minerals and vegetables, they all kind of want to express themselves and be what they are. Be what they are. Now, when people lose direction, they tend to jones for the sacred, and a lot of that has pumped up these issues into a little bit bigger than they should be, which is okay as long as people reconvert that energy into legitimate research, because a lot of research has to go on. There's a lot of amazing things. Let me just mention, people have heard about the pole shift idea, that the magnetic pole is now moving. The Tampa International Airport had to move its painted lines because it's moved so much north. I guess it's moving up towards Siberia. And that's a natural occurrence, and it may switch to be the South Pole at some point in the foreseeable future. Probably not going to make a lot of difference. It may affect the birds. That may be affecting the birds, or the chemtrails are affecting the birds. But that's a different show too, different episode. We'll get to those things. But regarding the pole shift, I just want to mention, if you guys want to read about this, Charles Hapgood, about 50 years ago, wrote about crustal displacement theory. Crustal displacement. He even got Albert Einstein to write the foreword for the book. And he talks about the shifting of the poles by way of the looseness of the skin of the earth, kind of breaking its connection to the mantle and shifting quickly in a short period of time. Say a small continent or a piece of a continent might move 1,000 miles in a day. And he had various reasons he was thinking this. And I just want to mention, as we talk about the flood myths that are common with this eschatology stuff. and Atlantis. We're always hearing so many of the religions, almost every world religion, has the creation is part of an education process where someone from a previous culture came and taught them the sciences, but mostly we hear the word measure, okay, which leads us to a discussion of metrology, which is the measure of ancient structures. We can get into that in a future time, but back to Charles Hapgood and the crustal displacement, I want to just mention something you may want to think about and ponder the evidence. We're finding a lot of ancient stuff all the time. Fossils, frozen mammoths are a hot item because we want to make that elephant you might have read about in the news. In 4 years, they're going to clone a mammoth. But what was interesting to Charles Hapgood 50 years ago was the baby mammoth that was found in Siberia, I think it was, at the turn of the century, which, when they examined the stomach contents of this frozen carcass, died about 10,500 years ago, it had undigested tropical fauna. They were able to examine the contents and it concluded that all of this stuff was from a warm environment. And the real shock was, how could it not have been digested? Because even if the animal was killed immediately after eating it, the contents of the stomach would have still been broken down a bit. And Mr. Hapgood, God bless his soul, he concluded that this beast, this young mammoth, didn't live in the North Pole because he wasn't that hairy, and none of the mammoths we find are that hairy enough that it gives them warmth. So, you got to question anytime they start showing woolly mammoths walking through strutting around like it's the walk in the park. It just got to be, it's very questionable, especially when we find this little guy with tropical food in his belly. No, I'm not saying someone dropped him off there, but Charles Hapgood, with Albert Einstein backing him up at the time, was saying crustal displacement moved the entire continent he was on to the north in one afternoon. Wow. And maybe with enough dumping of snow and the shock that would have been to the whole atmosphere, who knows, that the guy was flash frozen, because that's what would have been required to yield the evidence that we have. All right, now just look that up on your Funkin' Wagnalls, and we're going to move on. Can we get a chart behind me with the Osiris chart? We're going to talk about just briefly there's the golden ratio, but the Osiris chart is going to show how there's a lot of sons of God in a lot of different religions. Here we go. Resurrected sons of God. Just really quick, because I want you people to see that yes, Jesus is one of them, but he was the fourth of these big ones, and there's probably others, but Osiris Horus is the oldest of any of these guys. Born December 25th, died for 3 days, came back from the dead. There's a trinity there. There's a Father, Son, Holy Ghost, kind of with Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Mithras, Dionysus, also sons of God that were resurrected, born on that day. There's also research into the Dead Sea Scrolls and the true meaning of the Book of Revelation, which a lot of scholars like Barbara Teering, Theiring, has some excellent books on how she explains her interpretation of that whole situation based on the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a lot of information in there that opens up a whole new ballgame, because she claims Jesus lived quite some time after the alleged crucifixion and wrote the Gospels. And the Book of Revelation, according to her, is about what was happening at that time politically. Simon Magus being the so-called beast. And the number 666 having a meaning in the Hebrew alphabet of significance. It had nothing to do with any real devil number, because that's all been exaggerated. The whole Black Sabbath, 666, this all comes from the movie The Omen, and they're the first ones to kind of bring it in to the public's consciousness back then. But just not to get off track, We also saw back here Quetzalcoatl, born on December 25th of the Mayans. Ishtar, Orpheus. In Japanese, one of the creation people that was Azanagi, also born on that day. So just to introduce the idea to our viewers that the world's religions, you could argue whether they have a similar message. You could argue for about 2,000 years and keep arguing. Or we can look beyond that and see that, wow, they actually say a lot of the same things, implying possible common source. And when we see other connections, which we'll get into possibly next week, between the Mayans and the Atlanteans and the Egyptians, you'll be stunned, okay? And you're going to know that they're connected. One part of our culture, I don't want to get political or psychological on the show too much, but one part of our culture that's unfortunate is that it enhances and we encourage a type of thinking that's like, ta-da, I got it, or I won, or yeah, show me, okay? Those types of notions, as we mature, we don't do that as much, but we really got to let those types of notions go to the wayside as we go into these kind of esoteric knowledge, because it's going to rise up from within inside you, and you'll get a clarity in your mind that is not at all something you would shout. Okay, I just wanted to point that out. Incidentally, another connection I found with the time cycles, really the only significant one between Mayans and astronomy, was the precession of the equinoxes, which I'll explain in detail next week, which explains the Ophiuchus story. The precession of the equinoxes, the movement every 72 years of 1 degree around the whole zodiac, requires 25,920 years for the full journey around, back to the starting point, okay? That's close to the 5 Mayan worlds. The worlds are 5,126 years each. 5 of those worlds, the 5th one ending now, is close to this, 25,630 years. So the precession of the equinoxes and the Mayan, the end of this 5 Mayan world period that we're hitting, it's within about 300 years. Just want to point it out. A couple other things. The golden mean, can we get that up? A significant concept that we find everywhere that I just want you people to be familiar with. It's the ratio, you see the number, 1.618